back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, September 18th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the $ icon in the chat. This will help create a super chat for you. Any thoughts or comments that you may have that you want to see on the live broadcast that I will acknowledge. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss on the show today. So we're going to start it off by talking about the Dolphins placing Tua on injured reserve, and I'll talk about the impact of that and just more on that situation. Then I'll get into some more recaps. We'll talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win over the Lions, one of my favorite games of the weekend. We'll get into talking about the Jaguars dropping another game, this time to the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns pick up their first win of the season. So we'll talk about that. And then a couple of other things as well. We'll get into Marvin Harrison Jr.'s performance against the Rams after having a quiet debut against the Bills in Week 1. And I'll talk about the problems that the Rams have right now. And then we'll get into, in the final part of the show, we'll get into talking about all the 0-2 teams. What teams are still in it, I believe, that are still in it. And what teams are kind of just, time to look to next year. Well, I shouldn't say that, but for other 0-2 teams, it might be a wrap at this point in the season, which is crazy to say because it's only week 2. But you know how once we get to week 2 and you see a lot of 0-2 teams, you start looking at the playoff odds, and for teams that start off 0-2, usually your odds are not great. So. We'll get into all that in the final part of the show. But let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Dolphins placing Tua on injured reserve. So, I don't think anybody's really shocked by this. This is something that, one of the outcomes that was expected. I definitely didn't see a scenario in which he was going to play against Seattle this week. But this was the right move. Tua should take as much time off as he possibly can to get right. Now, I know there was all those conversations on, should he retire? There's a lot of money on the table. And look, I'm in the camp of I think he should retire. But at the same time, it's ultimately up to him. And unless a doctor tells him he shouldn't play, he's going to play. And he wants to play. So he's not going to retire. But, for me, you just worry about the person. And I think that's where most people are at, is you look at the injury history, the concussion history, and you say he probably should walk away. But he's not going to. So the next best course is, take as much time off as possible, heal up, and then when he's eventually able to come back, then he comes back. But my question now, just thinking about this, is if the Dolphins are out of it, do you risk another injury by having him come back and just finishing out the year, even if the Dolphins have no chance of making the playoffs. I mean, I feel like it's a no-brainer answer because you could easily say, no, why would he play in meaningless games? I probably lean towards that answer too. And he probably just takes the rest of the year off. Or maybe he's like, well, I'm healthy. I want to play. I want to at least finish out this season. So that could be a conversation that's had later on when he's getting closer to come back. Because, when you look at the Dolphins, yeah, I mean, now you got Skylar Thompson starting at quarterback, and they did bring in Tyler Huntley, the former Pro Bowl quarterback, who spent some time was with the Ravens, then spent some time with the Browns this offseason and in the preseason, but was let go, and then the Dolphins picked him up. I thought the Ravens picked him up again, but needless to say, he's on the Dolphins, so maybe we'll see him starting at some point down the line. Luis in the chat says, clean house. You might not be the only, I shouldn't say might, not the only Dolphins fan that's probably thinking that. But the Dolphins are still going to try to compete. And, I think they're still going to win some games. But in this loaded AFC, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because they got Seattle this week, who's 2-0. They got to go to Seattle. So they got to travel across country to the West Coast. And that is going to be a tough game. And you got a backup quarterback. Now, Skylar Thompson knows the system. I know he just got thrown in there last week against the Bills. But, we'll see what happens. Then they got Tennessee at home, which I think is a very winnable game. At the Patriots is going to be tough, division rival. Then you got a bye week. Then you come back, you take on the Colts. You take on the Cardinals at home. You're at the Bills week 9, at the Rams, home against the Raiders. Week 12, home against the Patriots, at the Packers on Thanksgiving. So I'm assuming Tua would be back by then. Or before then. Yeah, towards the end of the year, the Dolphins have a rough schedule. At Packers week 13, home against the Jets, at the Texans, home against the Niners, at the Browns, and then at the Jets. Yeah, that's a tough way to end out the season. It's a tough way to end out the season. But right now they're 1-1. So, we'll see what happens. Look, they still got a ton of playmakers on this team. And I think they still will piece together some wins. But, yeah, I mean, this makes the road to the playoffs a lot tougher for them, and especially in this conference. So, I guess they're just going to have to try to tread water until Tua comes back. Like I said, I think this is a good enough team where they could tread water, and Tua comes back and, maybe they're 3-5 or something. Because I don't think they're going to lose every single game without Tua. I think they're going to find a way to win some games. But it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. But this was the right call for the Dolphins to, I don't think they had any other choice. But I would have been shocked if Tua was playing next week. Or this week. But that was never going to happen. So, hope he recovers fast and he comes back and, he's ready to go and he's healthy. So, but yeah, it's a really tough decision because, everybody's talking about it. You train your whole life for this and, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. He gets that big contract extension. You're really living the dream, but you keep having these concussions, and it ultimately could be too much. And when is it going to be too much? Because now this is his 4th concussion in 3 years. Last year, didn't have any. So, I think we were all thinking, all right, we're moving past this. No. It happened again last Thursday. So, just got to hope for the best, but he is not walking away. And you know what? Again, unless it's a doctor, it's ultimately his decision. And he wants to continue to play. So, that's really what it comes down to. So, just got to hope for the best. But, yeah, at least, he's going to have some time off to get healthy. And then when he's ready to go, we'll probably see him again. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be completely out of it when he comes back, but if they are, completely out of it, then for me, I would say, yeah, I would let him sit out the rest of the year because there's no point of bringing him back and playing him in meaningless games. But that's not my decision. So, but yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about the Dolphins going forward. Do you think they'll be able to tread water while Tua is out? Again, they got so many playmakers on this team. They're going to definitely rely a lot on the running game. I mean, Devon Achane had a big game last week. Raheem Mostert, hopefully you get him back. So, that running game is very good. And then, of course, you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You just got to get the ball in their hands, and they can make a lot of things happen. So, and the defense, although James Cook, I mean, it looked good in week 1, but you see how the Jaguars offense has looked the last 2 weeks, and you think, and then you see what James Cook did to them last week. Yeah, I don't really know I don't know what to expect from the Dolphins defense. We'll see how they do on Sunday in Seattle against a team that's 2-0, and they got playmakers all over the place. So, we'll have to wait and see, but I think they could manage a little bit without Tua and stay afloat until he's healthy and he can come back. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about this situation here. So, we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will discuss another game from the weekend. We'll talk about the Lions-Buccaneers game. The Buccaneers avenging their playoff loss from last year, winning 20-16. So we will get into that when we come back from our first break of the show. And yeah, we still got some other games that I wanted to go over. Some I will actually, cover tomorrow, as we're already, halfway through the week. So, I mean, tomorrow is the first game of week 3 between the Jets and the Patriots. So, we're going to have a preview for that. But yeah, so when we come back, we'll preview another game from recap another game from week 2, the Buccaneers and the Lions game. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to get into talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' victory over the Detroit Lions on Sunday. Another good performance by Baker Mayfield. And yeah, last year, these were two teams that met in the playoffs, and the Lions were able to win that game. It was a good game, but this time, the Buccaneers were victorious, winning 20-16. And there's a lot of things to unpack from this game. Actually, there's so many games on Sunday. I'm not able to watch every single one. I mean, I'm able to at least see all of them on one screen with the game mix for DirecTV where I'm at. But there's so many things to talk about. But when it comes to this game, and I'll do my best with recapping it. Because all over the place, watching every game, paying attention to many different things when it comes to fantasy, the spread pool, all that. So, one thing I wanted to point out is, the Lions had 463 total yards in the game. The Buccaneers only had 216. And they were still able to win this game. And the Lions, I mean, they didn't play a great game. Jared Goff had a couple of interceptions in this game. Early on, he had an interception. Also, before the end of the half, the Lions were lining up to kick a field goal, and it would have made the game 13-9. The Bucs were up 13-6 at that point. And, Jake Bates was going to come on and kick a field goal. They were able to spike the ball with 3 or 4 seconds left in the first half. But all of a sudden, the special teams was running out onto the field, and the Lions got penalized for too many men on the field, and that required a 10-second runoff. The Lions didn't have any timeouts left, of course. That's why they had to spike the ball, and they ultimately could not get points from that. So that was a big play because look at the score. Because they went down the field a couple of times towards the end of the game, and they weren't able to get any points out of it. And that ultimately is why they lost 20-16. But like I said, Jared Goff did not play well in this game. The offense has been a little off these first couple weeks. I think they'll get right, but even in the Rams game in Week 1, Jared Goff did throw a pick late. Something's been off with them. The running game has still been good. I think that's something that they got to continue to do. And that's something that I criticized them in the championship game against the Niners. They had a great first half with it, and then they kind of went away from it. But that's something that I think they got to continue to do as well. Even though they did run the football well, but you wanted to see them maybe run it more. But anyways, let's go through the game summary. So the Bucs, first drive of the game, 7 plays, 58 yards down the field, 3.5 minutes of time of possession. There was a sack, fumble, but the Buccaneers were able to recover it. Chase McLaughlin had a good game. He kicked his first field goal, and that was from 30 yards out. So that made it 3-0 Bucs. Then Jared Goff threw a pick on the very first play of their first drive. Then the Buccaneers cashed in with a field goal, a 55-yarder from Chase McLaughlin. Then the Lions answered with the field goal drive. Jake Bates from 22 yards out. Buccaneers punted. Then the Lions went 13 plays, 67 yards on their next drive. Jake Bates, a 35-yard field goal to tie the game. Then in the second quarter, Baker Mayfield connected with Chris Godwin for a 41-yard touchdown to make it 13-6. He had a very good game. He's been really good these first 2 weeks. We always talk about Mike Evans. Mike Evans had a good game last week against the Commanders with 2 touchdowns. But Chris Godwin has gotten off to a solid start, and that's huge for the Buccaneers. If he's the Chris Godwin that we know. Because, last year he was okay, but this year he's been great these first 2 games. Lions punted on their next drive. Baker Mayfield then threw an interception that was intended for Mike Evans. Threw it into a lot of traffic. Was picked off by Brian Branch. And then, of course, I did go over the Lions mishandling that last possession before the half with the too many men on the field. Then they kicked a field goal, though, to start off the second half. Jake Bates from 32 yards out to make it 13-9. Buccaneers punted. Lions then took the lead on their touchdown drive. They went 12 plays, 68 yards. David Montgomery scored from 1 yard out, so that put them up by 3. However, the Buccaneers did answer with the touchdown drive. They went 6 plays, 70 yards. An 11-yard scramble by Baker Mayfield on 3rd and 4 and then a touchdown run. I mean, I guess it was like a designed run or something. It was a quarterback draw. Ran it right up the middle, broke a couple of tackles, and scored. That was a great play by Baker to put them up 20-16. The Lions punted, and then the Buccaneers punted in the fourth quarter. Jared Goff threw another interception, so that was costly. And then they turned it over on downs a couple of times, the Lions did. The Buccaneers punted. Lions, they got down in the red zone. It was 4th and 8 from the 11. He dumped it off to Jahmyr Gibbs, but it was only a 5-yard gain, so they turned it over on downs there. And then the Bucs' next drive lasted, only 20 seconds. It only lasted 3 plays. They went 3 and out. Baker tried to hit Mike Evans on 3rd and 6, but that pass got batted down, and that stopped the clock. And the Lions also had 1 timeout left. Then they started driving. They got to the Buccaneers 26, but they couldn't get it done. And the Bucs ultimately win. So Baker Mayfield, he finished going 12 of 19 for 185 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. He was their leading rusher. Rachaad White, I believe, got banged up in this game, so we'll have to keep an eye on his status going forward. Bucky Irvin had 22 yards rushing. Baker, 34 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. Chris Godwin, like I said, had a good game. 7 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans had 3 for 42. Jalen McMillan, 1 for 21. Rachaad White, 1 for 5. K. Dotton had a couple of targets, but no catches. Baker Mayfield, a couple of fumbles in this game, but didn't lose any of them. The Buccaneers' defense was ravaged by injuries. Vita Vea got hurt in this game. There was no Antoine Winfield Jr., and they were missing a couple other guys, too. And that's something that many people were talking about, is just the Bucs were dealing with a ton of injuries on defense, and they were still able to come away with the victory. That's an impressive win for them. And then as for the Lions, Jared Goff went 34 of 55, 307 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. They did do a fake punt early on in the game. Jake Fox, their punter, connected with Sione Vaki for a 17-yard gain, but I don't think did that amount to anything? I'm not sure, but yeah, that happened in the game. The Lions did run the ball for 139 yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery had a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs had 84 yards on the ground. Montgomery had 35. Jamison Williams also had a carry for 15 yards. He had another solid game, 5 receptions for 79 yards. But Amon-Ra St. Brown had a big game, of course. Last week was a bit of a disappointment, but he bounced back, 11 receptions for 119 yards. Was targeted 19 times. Sam Laporta only had 2 receptions for 13 yards. They got to get him going. David Montgomery had 4 for 35. Khalif Raymond, 3 for 27. Tim Patrick had 2 for 12. Brian Branch, like I said, had the interception in the game. But who else? Another player that had a big game for the Lions was Aiden Hutchinson. He was tormenting Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker Mayfield obviously got the last laugh with the victory, but Aiden Hutchinson finished with 4.5 sacks on the day, and he has 5.5 sacks on the season. So he's off to a very good start to his season. But yeah, the Bucs got the last laugh, though. They go on to take on the Broncos next week, and then as for the Lions, they take on the Cardinals next week, who we are going to talk about in a little bit. Well, in the 4th segment, we got to talk about the Jaguars after this, but yeah, I mean, a solid game for Baker. I mean, didn't throw for a ton of yards, but that's a big win for the Buccaneers. I mean, they've looked good so far. You talk about the Lions. I mean, you want to see them run the football a little bit more, even though they did run the ball well in this game. I mean, the Buccaneers right now, their running game was really non-existent in this game when you have Baker Mayfield as their leading rusher. So I guess that's one thing to point to. You want to see them run the football better. Also, got to get your guys back. These are key players on the defensive side of the ball that you were missing in this game, that got hurt in this game. So hopefully they come back. But watching the highlights, Baker was other than Aiden Hutchinson tormenting him, there were a lot of times where Baker was getting good protection, which was nice to see. And it was nice to see Chris Godwin, like I said, had a good game. Mike Evans didn't have a big game, but that's okay. Godwin picked up the slack for him. And that's really, I think, where the Lions were focusing all their attention was on Mike Evans, because Mike Evans did very well in the playoff game last year when these two teams met. So Godwin stepped up. Godwin is a solid number 2. So this team is 2-0, and they're tied with the Saints right now. You got the Falcons, who picked up that big victory against the Eagles the other night. So, this is going to be a competitive division. And the Panthers, they're, that distant 4th team right now, unless the Red Rifle, turns back the clock. But, yeah, that's a big win for the Buccaneers. Props to Baker Mayfield and that team to get it done. And like I said, next week they take on the Broncos. And as for the Lions, like I said, the offense has not looked great these first 2 games. But, well, I should say Jared Goff hasn't looked great these first 2 games with the turnovers. David Montgomery and that running game and Jahmyr Gibbs, they've looked good. Jamison Williams has looked good. Amon-Ra St. Brown, of course, had a monster game. But, Jared Goff hasn't looked great. So I think I should tweak that a little bit. I shouldn't say the offense hasn't looked great, but Jared Goff's the quarterback. He's the one that distributes the ball to his playmakers, and he hasn't been spectacular to start off the year. But the Lions are 1-1. I'm not worried about them. It's early on in the season. They're going to figure things out, and they have to, because I have them going to the Super Bowl. So they take on the Cardinals, and that's going to be a tough game. That's not going to be easy. When people looked at that game before the season started, they were probably like, "Yep, that's definitely a win." No, sir, that is definitely not a win, an easy win, with how they just played against the Rams. So, let me know what you guys think about this game. What were some of your takeaways from it? Let me know in the comments. So, before we go to break, I do want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the $ icon in the chat. This will help create a super chat. Any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast, I can acknowledge. And it just makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link, which is gsmcpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about another offense that's struggling, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars dropping another game 18-13 to the Cleveland Browns. Trevor Lawrence continues to struggle, so we're going to talk about that game when we return from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Jaguars-Browns game. The Browns picking up their first win of the season, 18-13 over the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was the Jaguars' home opener. They renamed the stadium for Trevor Lawrence for this game, and did not go great for the Jags and their offense. And I'll get into some statistics from an article that I saw on ESPN to just, tell you how bad the Jaguars offense has been to start off the year. Let's go through the game summary. So the Browns, on their first drive, so the Jaguars started off the game with the ball, but they punted. And then the Browns, an impressive drive, 16 plays, 89 yards, over 9 minutes of time of possession down the field. Deshaun Watson hit Elijah Moore for 22 yards. hit Jerry Jeudy for 21 yards, who had a good game. But eventually they got down in the red zone at the 1, 2nd and goal. Watson took it up the middle for a touchdown to make it 7-0 Browns. Jaguars punted, and then the Browns kicked the field goal. So they scored They scored on their first 2 possessions. Dustin Hopkins from 53 yards out to make it 10-0 Browns. Then the Jaguars responded with the field goal drive of their own. Little from 22 yards out made it 10-3. And then the Browns, they answered with another field goal drive, Dustin Hopkins from 38 yards out. And that was helped by a 36-yard run by Jerome Ford on 4th and 1, which was actually from the Cleveland 37. So that was a risky play, but that paid off. And then the Jags, they ended up just, Trevor Lawrence connected with Travis Etienne, but that went nowhere, and that ended the half. So then the Browns punted to start the second half. The Jaguars punted. They kicked a field goal, then the Browns after that. A few penalties. One was on their offensive line. There was a holding, but then there was a defensive pass interference, and then there was a roughing the passer penalty as well. A lot of penalties on this drive. But eventually, they got to the Jaguars 26. Dustin Hopkins kicked another field goal, so that made it 16-3. Then Little missed another field goal late in the game. This was a 43-yarder. And then the Browns punted. But then the Jags, they went 3 plays, 72 yards in just a little over a minute of time of possession. Trevor Lawrence connected with Brian Thomas Jr. for 66 yards. And it was like, there's a big play in this offense finally. And then Travis Etienne from 4 yards out scored a rushing touchdown to make it 16-10. The Browns punted. Then the Jaguars went on a 13-play, 83-yard drive. 6 minutes, 42 seconds of time of possession down the field. Little kicked a 25-yard field goal to make it 16-13. Browns punted. And then, actually, this was a great punt because, it went out of bounds, I think, at like the 2 or the 1. And, it was at the 2. And then on that very first play of the Jaguars' drive, Trevor Lawrence got sacked for a safety, and that made it 18-13. Then the Browns punted, and the Jaguars, they just they ran out of time. They were driving, but ultimately ran out of time, and they ended up losing, and they fall to 0-2. So Deshaun Watson, again, didn't put up monster numbers. He went 22 of 34, 186 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions, was sacked twice. The Browns ran the ball for 125 yards in total. Deshaun Watson had a rushing touchdown, like I mentioned before. Jerome Ford was their leading rusher. He had 64 yards on the ground. And Deontay Foreman had 42 yards on the ground. Jerry Jeudy was their leading receiver, had a good game. 4 receptions for 73 yards. Amari Cooper only had 3 receptions for 11 yards. So we'll have to keep an eye on that because maybe Jerry Jeudy's taking over as the number 1 receiver in this offense. Even though, again, it's still early. Amari's going to have good games. Elijah Moore had 6 receptions for 44 yards, and they were without David Njoku. So this was a big win with missing one of their pieces on offense. The Browns had 4 sacks in this game on defense. Myles Garrett had his sack, I think his second sack of the season. But yeah, they had a few other sacks as well. Quinn Jefferson had a sack as well. So the Jets miss him because that's where I guess that's where he went. But yeah, great punt to set up the safety by Corey Buorquez. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I apologize if I butchered that. And then as for Trevor Lawrence, 14 of 30, 220 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 4 sacks on the day. Travis Etienne only had 52 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence had 45 yards rushing, had a 33-yard scramble. Brian Thomas Jr., 2 receptions for 94 yards. They were without Evan Ingram, who got injured in pregame warm-up, so that was, they missed him in this game. Christian Kirk, 1 reception for -1 yards. They got to get him more involved. Brenton Strange stepped in as the number 1 tight end, 3 receptions for 65 yards. Gabe Davis had 3 for 43. The Jaguars defense only had 2 sacks on the day. But yeah, this was just another bad performance by the Jaguars and their offense. And now they play the Bills. And this is how bad it's gotten for the Jaguars and their offense. So the Jaguars are averaging 50, and this is courtesy of ESPN.com. So the Jaguars are averaging 15 points per game, worse than all but 4 teams, and 295 yards per game. They're struggling on third down and in the red zone, and, like I said, Christian Kirk is just not getting the ball. Doug Peterson said it's not who we are after the loss. Coaches, players work too hard during the week. Listen, that's a good defense, a really good defense, probably one of the best in the league, which he's not wrong about. If there's a measuring stick, then we didn't measure up well. There's too much talent. I think there's signs of it, but just not consistent enough. So in the red zone, the Jaguars scored touchdowns on only half of their red zone drives, which is 21st in the NFL in 2023, and it's even worse in 2024. They've scored touchdowns on just 3 of their 7 drives, which is 42.9%, and lost a fumble on another. In the third quarter, Travis Etienne was tackled for a 3-yard loss. On 2nd and 5 from the 14, Myles Garrett beat left tackle Cam Robinson for a sack. Cam Little's 43-yard field goal bounced off the right upright. So that's what ended up, that's what led to the missed field goal. And that was costly, because they could have tied the game at that point, as my camera, for some reason, just decides to go crazy. But yeah, it doesn't stop there with the Jags. So then in the fourth quarter, Lawrence connected with Christian Kirk on a 2-yard touchdown pass on 2nd down, but the play was nullified by an illegal shift penalty on running back Dearness Johnson. So, yeah, that really was costly. Now, when it comes to third down, the Jaguars have converted 5 of their 19 third downs. That's only 26.3%, which ranks 28th in the NFL. They've been particularly bad on third and medium, and which is 4 to 6 yards to go, and 0 for 5, tied for last in the league. Trevor Lawrence has completed 3 of 14 passes on third down, and his completion percentage of 21.4% is the worst in the NFL, significantly behind Bryce Young, who has 33.3%. And he just got benched for Andy Dalton. So, yeah, not good there. Also, the lack of involvement from Christian Kirk. You want to see him getting involved more. And also, you got to get Evan Ingram back. Because Evan Ingram is a big target for Trevor Lawrence. And they definitely missed him in this game. Now, there was some miscommunication. The Jaguars twice had to call timeout because they ran out of time on plays inside the Cleveland 5-yard line. Trevor Lawrence said one of the times was his fault because they didn't have the urgency getting out of the huddle and getting up to the line of scrimmage fast enough. And also in the article, it talks about how losing Ingram impacted things because that changed personnel groups 90 minutes before kickoff, and those adjustments didn't go as smoothly because there's a general breakdown of the process that has to stop. And that's what Trevor Lawrence said. And he said there's no excuses. We've got to look at it and say, hey, is it me? Am I not communicating good enough in the huddle? Are we not getting our substitutes in fast enough? Are we not listening enough in the huddle? Are we not tight enough? Are we breaking the huddle and asking what we've got? Different things. It's all on us. We all have to look at that and just put emphasis on communication. It's day one stuff. It's simple stuff. So, yeah, it's a mess right now for the Jags offensively, and they got to get it going. I mean, look, you look at the division. I mean, fortunately, you're tied with 2 other teams with the same record. The Colts are 0-2, and the Titans are 0-2, but the Texans are 2-0. And, you keep losing games, that division is going to continue to slip away, and you got to focus on the wild card. Now, I didn't have the Jaguars making the playoffs. I did have them finishing with a winning record, but right now it doesn't look good. The offense has not looked great. Last week they had an opportunity to beat the Dolphins. They were up by 10 points, and the offense just shut down. Travis Etienne had a touchdown, and he fumbled. So that game could have been a lot different. They should be at least 1-1. But they definitely had a lot of opportunities in this game where, they could have won this game as well. So they got to get things going, get the ball to their playmakers more. Also, the offensive line for the Jaguars continues to not be great. That's the other thing, too. But, people are saying this could be it for Doug Peterson as the head coach. I mean, this team has really, regressed early on in the season. I mean, they finished the season strong in 2022. They made the playoffs. Last year, they started off 8-3, but then they collapsed, and it's continuing into this season. So, and this is with the a healthy Trevor Lawrence. So, it's not looking good. He's not playing well. He's got to play better. So, yeah, it's been bad. And then also, I wanted to bring up another stat as well regarding Trevor Lawrence. So, I believe this is in his last 7 starts, if I still have it. Oh, yeah. So, in his last 7 starts, he's 0-7, 10 touchdown passes to 7 picks, 6 fumbles, and a quarterback rating of 81.9. Not good. It's not good. He's got to play better. He got that big contract, and so far he has not lived up to it. Now, a lot of people said maybe he didn't deserve that kind of contract because he hasn't really lived up to, where he was selected. When 2022 happened and they made the playoffs, they finished the season strong, they won a playoff game, they come back against the Chargers, you thought, okay, Trevor Lawrence has arrived. Well, still kind of waiting. So, and they got a big game against the Bills. It doesn't get any easier, so you got to hope they win that. Otherwise, they're looking at 0-3. And I spent most of the time talking about the Jaguars, but you know what? The Browns, Deshaun Watson looked somewhat better, completed some nice passes to Jerry Jeudy. They ran the football okay in this game. So, that was a big win for them. And they take on the New York Football Giants on Sunday. So we'll see how that game goes. But, yeah, so they even their record at 1-1. Jaguars are 0-2, and they take on the Bills next Monday night. So we're going to take our next break. When we come back, we will talk about Marvin Harrison Jr.'s monster performance on Sunday against the Rams. And we'll also talk about the Rams, too. I know we talked about them this week, but we're going to talk about them again and just how they are dealing with a ton of injuries right now. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr.'s monster performance on Sunday against the Rams, and let's get into that. We'll pull up the stats I have from that game with the graphic. So, obviously, he had a quiet debut, and Kyler Murray made some interesting comments after the game about how we talked about in the production meeting that he misspoke, and that's probably what ended up happening, but it just came off as something completely different, like, yeah, it's not my job to get him the ball. Well, but you're the quarterback. You throw the ball to him. How else is he supposed to get the ball if you don't throw it to him? Unless you want to, have him, carry the ball out of the backfield. But, yeah, Kyler Murray got him the ball. Kyler Murray got him the ball, and he had a monster performance, as you see the stats here, after last week where he only had 1 reception for 4 yards. He went off in this game. He went off in the first quarter. Most of his yards came in the first quarter. So the Rams started off the game. They turned it over on downs. They went for it on 4th down, I believe. Yeah, they went for it on 4th and 2 from the Cardinals' 41, and they didn't get it. And then the Cardinals went 6 plays, 60 yards, and Murray connected with, who also had a good game as well, Wanted to mention that. He connected with Marvin Harrison Jr. for 23 yards. That was a great pitch and catch. Then the Rams punted. Cardinals answered with a touchdown. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s second touchdown of the game for 60 yards, and that was the only play of that drive. Rams punted again, and then the Cardinals went 8 plays. 13 plays, 99 yards, 8.5 minutes of time possession down the field. And Kyler made a great play, was able to scramble out and find Higgins, Elijah Higgins, for, I believe, an 18-yard touchdown. Elijah Higgins, the tight end, from 18 yards out. So that made it 21-0. This game just completely unraveled for the Rams very quickly in an eye blink. On top of that, Cooper Kupp got hurt in this game, had to leave with the ankle injury. He was in a walking boot, and he's supposedly going to miss an extended period of time, which we talked about earlier this week. So we'll keep an eye on that. The Rams did get on the board, though, in the second quarter. They scored a field goal, 7 plays, 59 yards. And Cardi, from 29 yards out, kicked the field goal. So, that made it 21-3. Cardinals answered with a field goal. Both teams punted. Rams turned it over on downs. It was 24-3 at the half. Cardinals opened up the third quarter with a touchdown drive. James Conner from 5 yards out made it 31-3. Rams then punted. Cardinals kicked another field goal to make it 34-3. However, the Rams did put together a touchdown drive to make it 34-10. Kyren Williams from 4 yards out. However, the Cardinals did answer with another touchdown drive. James Conner fumbled, which would have been great for another touchdown for me in fantasy. Him and Jacobs both fumbled at the goal line. So I could have had, a lot more points. It was recovered by Trey McBride for a touchdown. So that made it 41-10, and that was basically it. Clayton Tune came in the game. Both teams actually exchanged fumbles in the fourth quarter. But, it didn't amount to anything. Cardinals win big, 41-10. And for Kyler Murray, he went 17-21, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Cardinals as a team ran for 231 yards. James Conner had the rushing touchdown, continues to be a beast. 21 carries for 122 yards. Kyler Murray had 5 for 59. He had a 26-yard run. Amari DiMercado had a big run in this game for 41 yards. He had 2 carries for 46 yards in total. Trey Benson, their rookie running back, had 11 carries for 10 yards. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, you see the stats there. 4 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Trey McBride, 6 for 67. Michael Wilson, 2 for 31. Clayton Tune was the one that lost the fumble. Collier had a fumble recovery. The Cardinals' defense had 5 sacks in this game. Matthew Stafford had a rough game. 19-27, 216 yards. The Rams only ran the ball for 53 yards. Kyren Williams had 25 yards on the ground. Blake Corum actually was their leading rusher. He had 28 yards on the ground. Demarcus Robinson was their leading receiver, 2 receptions for 50 yards. Tutu Atwell was 3 for 48. Cooper Kupp had 4 for 37. Kyren Williams had 4 for 27. But, it's just not a good game. Not a good game for the Rams. And this season for the Rams is going to spiral out of control. And I talked about this earlier in the week. They are dealing with a ton of injuries right now. So now you're down your top 2 receivers. No Cooper Kupp. No Puka Nacua. You're already missing Tyler Higbee. He's recovering from the ACL injury from last year. But you're missing offensive lineman Joe Noteboom. He was placed on IR. You're missing Connor McDermott. KT Leveston. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Darius Williams, who they brought in for the secondary, he's out. They're missing a ton of guys. A lot of these guys are being placed on IR. And this season is going to slip away from the Rams because I don't think they're going to be able to overcome these injuries. And I worry about Stafford because, a lot of the offensive line is banged up. You're missing your top 2 weapons. You're going to get hurt with the lack of protection. And now you got to play the 49ers, who are coming in. They want to win after that loss that they just had to the Vikings. Although, now they're missing Deebo Samuel along with Christian McCaffrey, so, they're a little bit vulnerable, but the Rams are more vulnerable. And, I had this team making the wild card at 10-7. This looks like 2022 all over again for them. And at some point, it would not surprise me, and I don't want to see it happen, but we could be seeing another quarterback playing other than Matthew Stafford this year because he might get hurt. I worry about him behind that offensive line with no weapons. Like, at least, like, against the Lions, like, you had a lot of injuries but to the offensive line, but you at least, I know Puka got hurt earlier in the game, but you had Cooper Kupp, and you could at least just dump it off to Cooper Kupp, and he makes plays. You don't have that right now. And, you still got Kyron Williams, but, teams are going to just, stuff the run and make Matthew Stafford try to, connect with Demarcus Robinson or Whittington and all these guys that, they aren't really threats at the receiver position. So it's a mess right now for the Rams. I said if any guy can overcome this, it's Sean McVay, because he is one of the best head coaches in the NFL, but there's just a ton of problems. And then you got a young defense as well that you're trying to, work through as well. It's just there's a lot going on for the Rams, and I don't think they're going to be able to overcome it. You got the 49ers. I think that's going to be a loss. So you're going to be 0-3. And then you continue on after that. Then you got to go to the Bears, who have a very good defense, but the offense has been struggling. That could be a game where Caleb Williams gets it going. Then you're home against the Packers. You got a bye week, so maybe after the bye, maybe you get some of these guys back. I don't know. Then you have the Raiders at home. You have the Vikings at home, at Seattle, home against the Dolphins. Late in the season, it's going to be tough because then you're home against the Eagles, at the Saints, home against the Bills, at the 49ers, at the Jets, home against the Cardinals, at the Seahawks. Yeah, there's a lot of losses in there. And there's a lot of losses now. So the Rams could finish with a very bad record if they don't get healthy and if they can't tread water. Could they tread water? Maybe. You still got Matthew Stafford. You still got Sean McVay. But Stafford's got nothing at his disposal right now. Or I should say nothing, but he doesn't have a lot. So, yeah, not looking good for the Rams right now. And we're going to talk about them in the next segment. And then as for the Cardinals, they look good. They look good. They should be 2-0. You could make that argument. They should be 2-0 right now. But they beat a team that has owned them for years. Let's be honest. The Rams have owned the Cardinals. Just like the 49ers have owned the Rams have owned the Cardinals in this division. Kyler Murray's been playing really well to start off the year. What are his stats right now? So right now he's got 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. James Conner has looked great to start off the year. The Cardinals as a team, these first 2 weeks, 759 yards of offense. So they've looked good. And they got to continue to build and improve. And, they take on the Lions at home. The Lions are coming off of that loss against the Bucs, so, they're going to want to come out and play really well. But it's not going to be an easy game for the Lions. Cardinals are going to give them a tough time. But, yeah, then they got the Commanders after that at home. I think they should win that. Then at the 49ers. They could win that. They could win that at the Packers. There's no games that I see here on this schedule where I think they have virtually no chance. They could be competitive in a lot of these games. So, we'll see. This definitely could be one with the Rams kind of, I almost said the Lambs. With the Rams, it seems like they're falling out of it. The Cardinals could be one of those teams that takes over one of those playoff spots. So, from me, because I had the Rams as the last wild card team. But, yeah, very impressed by the Cardinals. For the Rams, it's bad luck right now for them. So hopefully, they can get these guys back faster. They haven't officially put Cooper Kupp on IR yet, but they did say he's going to miss an extended period of time. So I'm assuming they're going to do that. I'm surprised they haven't done that already. And I'm checking the sleeper app. Yeah, no, they still haven't done anything yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, but it's more likely than not that he's going to go on IR. So, but yeah, let me know what you guys think about this game. What were your takeaways from it? Like I said, the Cardinals, they will be taking on the Lions next week, And as for the Rams, they will be taking on the 49ers. So, 2 tough games coming up for those 2 teams. So, yeah, with that, we are going to take our final break of the show. And then when we come back, we will talk about all the 0-2 teams. We'll talk about them and, what team seasons are, on their way to being over and what teams are still not out of it. What teams are okay, even though they started off 0-2. So we're going to break down all the 0-2 teams when we come back, and I'll give you my my thoughts on all of them and who still has a chance and who doesn't. So, yeah, with that being said, for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to get into talking about all the 0-2 teams and what teams, your season's probably over, what teams you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. So, let's get into it. So, we'll start off with the teams, the 0-2 teams in the NFC. So, there's 3 of them. We got the New York Football Giants, we have the Carolina Panthers, and the Rams. So, I just talked about the Rams. Yeah, the season might be over. Especially now with Cooper Kupp being out. Because at least last year when they didn't have Cooper Kupp, they had Puka Nacua. Now, they got nobody. DeMarcus Robinson was good for them last year, but he was like their number 3 option. Now he's their number 1 option. So, yeah, it's not looking good for the Rams. I think their season could be over and we could be heading towards another 2022 season. Which I hate to say, because I like Matthew Stafford and I like Sean McVay, but I just, at this point, it's too much to overcome. So, but we just talked about them. Then we got the Panthers and the Giants. Yeah, it's over. It's over for both of those teams. Now, let's see how Andy Dalton plays for the Panthers. I said it yesterday. I don't think he's going to come in and just light it up. But, it'll look bad if he comes in and the offense looks a lot better than how it did with Bryce Young. It won't look good on Bryce Young's part. And I know, there's a lot of people talking about how the organization failed Bryce Young, which I do agree. Because, and this is what happened with Daniel Jones, who, with the Giants, another team that's 0-2 right now. 3 head coaches. 3 different offensive coordinators. And in a less amount of time than Daniel Jones, because Daniel Jones is in year 6. Bryce Young is only in year 2, because you had Frank Reich, they got rid of him, interim head coach takes over, then they go and get Dave Canales. On top of that, offensive line's not great. I did say this, they did bring in more weapons. They drafted a running back, they drafted a receiver, they traded for Deontay Johnson. It's not like they didn't do anything. Again, is it great? No. But they at least, and they also did try to improve the offensive line as well. So it's not like they didn't do anything to try to help out Bryce Young. I was just a little bit surprised by how they just pulled the carpet out from under him already. It's week 2. So, yeah, now you got Andy Dalton. But, yeah, the Panthers are not going anywhere. I mean, I didn't really have them finishing with a great record either. I mean, I think I gave them like 3 wins. So, we're going to see more of the Red Rifle. Let's see what he does on Sunday against the Raiders. But, yeah, their season's been over. So, and it's, I hate to say that because it's already week 2. It's only week 2. Well, now we're in week 3. But, yeah, their season's over. And then we get to the Giants. So, I'm not going to get into the game. I'll get into it tomorrow. Their season's over as well. I mean, I didn't have them making the playoffs. And the funny thing is, if they win on Sunday, they're tied for first place in the division. But they had to be the only team that lost it. Well, actually, no, that's not true. The Commanders were the only team that won. But, of course, they have to be the only team that's 0-2 in this division right now. So, as a Giant fan, you got to at least hope that things somewhat get better. Or, you're kind of just hoping at this point that they tank and they get one of these top quarterbacks next year, whether it's Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck or Shedeur Sanders. Because it's not going to be Daniel Jones next year. It's not. Now, did he play bad on Sunday? Not really. Not really. Could he have played better? Yes. But it's got to be somebody else. But not even just that. They have more problems than just the quarterback. The defense has not played well. Third down defense has been terrible to start off the year. It's just not looking good right now for the Giants. Not looking good. And it's not going to get better. They take on the Browns this week. Could they win that game? I think they could. Because it's not like Deshaun Watson's been great. But, I got excited about this defense going into the year. Has not looked good. Has not lived up to what I expected. So, yeah, for all 3 of the NFC teams that are 0-2, yeah, it's not looking good. Then we move to the AFC, which is a lot more interesting. So you got no 0-2 teams in the AFC East. But in the AFC North, the best division in football, you got 2 0-2 teams. And they are the 2 teams that I had finishing first and second in the division. The Ravens and the Bengals. First of all, the Ravens, you could make the argument they should be 2-0. Or at least 1-1. But they're not. They're 0-2. The Bengals lost to the Patriots. They could have won that game. And they had missed opportunities there. And you could make the argument they should have beaten the Chiefs. That pass interference call doesn't happen. They're 1-1. So both of these teams could be 2-0 or at best 1-1. Or at worst 1-1. But they're both 0-2. I'm not worried about them. I'm not. Joe Burrow looked better against the Chiefs. The Bengals play well against the Chiefs. And, if they didn't play well in that game, then that's a problem. But they should have won that game. They didn't. I'm not worried about them. They're going to figure it out. And this is a team that typically starts off slow. They have started off 0-2 before. They started off 0-2. Did they start off 0-2 last year? I know they lost to Cleveland week 1. I forget who they played in week 2. But anyways, I know in 2022 they started off 0-2. And what happened? They went to the AFC Championship game. And people are worried about Joe Burrow and how he was, how he couldn't pick up the water bottle or he was picking it up funny. It's like, what, guys, come on. Like, what are we doing? I said that. I said this already on a previous show. But people are worried about Joe Burrow. And, yeah, I had concerns when he was, flexing out the wrist. But he looked good. He looked good. And once they get T. Higgins back, this offense is going to look a lot better. Maybe we'll see Jamar Chase have a big game finally. I'm not worried about them. The Ravens, I'm not really worried about either. Although, do both teams have some issues? Yes. What team doesn't have issues? But The Ravens, yeah, I mean, losing to the Raiders and blowing a 10-point lead twice, it's not good. They got to, actually, no, they didn't blow a 10-point lead twice. But, you got to beat the Raiders at home, especially when you're up by 10 points. And they didn't do that. So now they take on the Cowboys, which is going to be a tough game because the Cowboys are coming off of a brutal loss as well in a different way. They got blown out by the Saints. So, both teams are going to want to win that game. And, I mean, I don't see the Ravens falling to 0-3. And if they do, that is a huge problem. I mean, you got Ravens fans already have been calling for John Harbaugh's job. And if the Ravens end up having a disappointing year, he's probably gone. But I'm not worried about them. It's still early. The Steelers are 2-0. They're in first place in this division, which is hard to believe. But that's where we're at right now. Yeah, they're going to be fine. Then we go to the AFC South. You got 3 0-2 teams. The Texans are 2-0. You got the Titans who are 0-2. They could be 2-0. The Jaguars, a couple of games that, they could have won. The Colts, they did not play a good game against Green Bay at all. Anthony Richardson was not good in that game. Didn't really talk about that game this week. Malik Willis picked up his first victory. But yeah, I mean, they played well against the Texans, but didn't play well against the Packers. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to declare that their seasons are over, but they're not trending in the right direction. I mean, I didn't have any of these teams making the playoffs. The Titans I had finishing last. I had them at 6-11. Will Levis, these turnovers are a problem. They're costing your team games. They're taking points off the board. Against the Jets, at least if, you don't get it, you don't convert a touchdown, at least you kick a field goal. They couldn't do that because he tries to, get it to Tajay Spears, who drops the ball. Jets end up recovering. And then you had the pick six in week 1 against the Bears. Can't happen. For the Jaguars, they got to get their offense going. Will Levis has got to cut down on the turnovers. Anthony Richardson, I mean, the first week looked great, but only completed 9 passes, but made the most of those 9 passes. And then on Sunday against the Packers, he had 3 interceptions. Now, one of them came at the end of the game, but still, he wasn't good. Colts only put up 10 points. So they got to get it going. I mean, the Texans, I think, early on it looks like they're going to run away with this thing. I mean, they look like the best team out of all of them. Well, they are the best team out of all of them. But, yeah, I mean, these teams got to start winning some games, or otherwise, I mean, the Texans are really going to run away with this thing. And then finally, we got the Broncos 0-2. Yeah, I mean, they don't have a lot of playmakers on offense. The Steelers' defense really shut them down. They had their opportunities. Bo Nix threw a red zone interception. That can't happen. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really expect the Broncos to do much this year. I think I had them in, 5 wins? It might be less than that. You got the Buccaneers in Tampa next week. That's going to be a loss, most likely. Then you're at the Jets. Zach Wilson's coming home party. Yeah, it's not looking good. Late in the season, you got the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Falcons. I think will be better later in the season. You got the Bengals, and then the Chiefs, week 17 and 18. Yeah, it's not looking good. Not looking good for the Broncos. So yeah, I think when it comes to the panic meter, I mean, a lot of these teams, yeah, you should panic, but you might not be panicking. You might just be like, whatever. We knew this season wasn't going anywhere. The Bengals and the Ravens will be fine. For the other teams in the AFC South, the Titans, like I said, I had them at 6 wins. Jaguars and the Colts, I mean, they should be playing better. So, and and Will Levis makes some plays where you're like, that was, that pass to Ridley for the touchdown. I mean, that should have been picked, but he's got a big arm. He got a lot of weapons. You just got to stop trying to do too much. I think that's the other thing. Like, how Justin Fields last year was talking about thinking too much? Will Levis could be doing the same thing. And he's trying to play hero ball. You got to stop doing that. And if he could do that, I think the Titans can, maybe, I still have him at 6 wins. This team is not going winless, but you got good receivers on this offense. You got a couple of good running backs. Tony Pollard has gotten off to a good start. You get backed by a good defense. The Titans could very easily be 2-0 right now, but they're not. So, and then for the Jaguars, you got to get it going offensively, like I said. And, for the Colts, give Jonathan Taylor the ball, and Anthony Richardson's got to limit the turnovers as well. So, but yeah, let me know what you guys think about the 0-2 teams. Which team do you think has, what are some of your thoughts on it? I think we all could say the Panthers are probably the team that you could point to as the 0-2 team that is really has the least amount of chance of doing anything. But just let me know what you guys think about the 0-2 teams. What teams would you panic about the most? What teams do you think, will be fine despite starting off 0-2? The 2 AFC North teams that I said, the Ravens and the Bengals, they're going to figure it out. They'll be fine. So that is all we have for today on the show. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Give the other shows some love. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.